Okay, welcome to Mining Now. On this show, we try to get the experts across the mining industry. Today, we've got the company that they estimate that they manage their asset management system manages about 50% of the world's heavy mining equipment. So I think we have the experts on when we introduce RPMGlobal to Mining Now. So thanks for joining us, everybody. And I'd like to welcome Andrew Johnston to the show and Derek Polano. Welcome, gentlemen.
It's very good to be here.
Thank you.
There's a lot to cover about our RPM, so we're going to get into it pretty quick. We're going to hand it over to our advertisers here in a sec as well. But before we do that, can you just maybe Andrew, can you give us that scope of who RPM is, and then we'll dig into it for the rest of the show.
Yeah, sure. Look, RPM's a global company that's been around we celebrated our 50-year anniversary just a few years ago. So our background has been able to, over the years, we started off by trying to help out the mining industry as the advisory side. So we're split sort of down the middle between both the advisory side and the software consulting side. So we've been developing and helping mining customers, like I said, for over 50 years, trying to really come about the software side came out because we wanted a better tool to be more efficient ourselves. And then our clients decided, like, hey, that stuff's pretty good. Can we get that? So we started to design, develop the software and make it available to customers around the world.
We're going to actually break down examples and these different buckets and everything. There's so much to cover. And then even the adoption side. So please bear with us. We're going to hand it over to our sponsors and we'll be right back after that.
Today we have Railware. Railware's truly autonomous material haulage systems reduce transport costs up to 91%. And because Railware is fully electric, it produces zero direct emissions. The truly autonomous system enhances health and safety by eliminating exhaust fumes and enabling remote monitoring of operations. Railware isn't merely a concept or pilot program. It's available right now and is being proven in a growing number of installations around the globe. Visit their new website at railware.com today and step into the future of mining. Next up, we have process automation. Process automation is a byproduct of the massive South African mining industry, which was served from conception and grew into a leading mass measurement instrumentation manufacturing company. Process automation is the original equipment manufacturer of conveyor belt scales, density gauges, weight feeders, level gauges, blocked chute detectors, speed sensors and switches, and bin, silo, and hopper weighing systems. Their strengths are in their expertise, professionalism, and strong focus on after-sales support. This results in a successful outcome on every project. To learn more, go to process-auto.com. Process automation. If you can process it, we can measure it. Next up, we have Savannah Equipment. Savannah Equipment supplies new and used mining equipment around the world, from placer to underground to ore processing plants. They have gold concentrating tables, trommels, and mineral jigs in stock now to take advantage of the high gold prices. You can visit them at savannahequipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day. Next up, of course, we also have CIM. The CIM 2022 Convention and Expo is coming back to Vancouver in person this May 1st to 4th. Show off your products and services in mining technology, digitalization, equipment, consulting, and engineering. There are a whole lot of perks awaiting for exhibitors, and this expo will sell out fast. If you're a researcher thinking about what mining will look like for future generations, this convention is the perfect place to present your technical paper or lead a short course. Visit CIM.org for more details and book your exhibitor space and submit your abstracts today. We also have Mining for Miracles. This year, Mining for Miracles is eyeing the completion of its commitment to raise $3.385 million to establish the Cellular and Regenerative Medicine Center at BC Children's Hospital to better understand the genetic cause of heart arrhythmias in children. Get involved or make donations at miningformiracles.ca. And last but not least, we have PowerZone. When you need a specialized team of world-class engineers for your oil and gas pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit powerzone.com. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge, no matter the location. Get in the zone with PowerZone. Visit them at powerzone.com.
Okay, let's kick off the show. Andrew, I'm going to stay with you for a moment because you mentioned the software side, the consulting and advisory side. I've had my eye on RPM for a long time, wanted to have the company on the show, so it's very good to have both of you here. Can you just expand on that software and on the consulting side, and just that overall objective of RPM?
Sure. Yeah, so our main purpose is really to advance the mining industry to a more safer, efficient, and sustainable future. And we want to do so by really delivering innovative software solutions on the software side, as well as be able to provide a deep domain knowledge on the mining industry on the advisory side. So with the advisory folks, like they're doing things from sustainability, feasibility studies, engineering analysis, all the sort of technical details from the initial reserves and exploration all the way to the actual closeout of the mine. And then on the software side of things, we're trying to cover the entire life cycle of the mine and help find more efficient and sustainable ways to do things so that we can have to enable our clients to be more efficient and be able to operate mines long into the future and do so in a sustainable, safe manner.
I've worked in the small business world for most of my life. So, I've seen the situations where a company is trying to do, they try to adopt a new system without the consultation process and all that. Obviously, you're dealing with large scale mining operations. Can you do one without the other, or do companies ever try it, or do they go hand in hand, the consultation and the software?
We're really in our side. They're kind of two separate sides of the business. So we've got a whole team because they're often different I'd say users that are going to use those two services. So on the consulting side, for the actual advisory side of things, these are the actual like true like feasibility technical studies and whatnot. On the software side, we've got our own sort of consultants that sort of support the implementation and adoption of the software. So there'd be sort of consulting that goes along with the software as well. But on the advisory side, it's more just like a bunch of engineers over there that really come in and fit the bill for specific tasks that I need to get done, like some sort of a report feasibility study I need to get delivered to investors to prove out a new mine development or something.
Okay, no, that's very nicely explained. So, I guess both of you now, I'd like to have an understanding of what your roles are at the company. Derek, can we kind of hand it over to you? What is sort of your day to day with RPM?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So my day to day, I'm part of the sales team, and really my role is somewhat as a product specialist. So I spend a lot of time meeting with customers, trying to understand, what they're doing today, what some of their current challenges are, and then try to match their challenges with software that we have that might be able to address some of those challenges. So finding the right solutions of ours that may fit the bill for them, help them out in some way, and then we get into sort of matching that up. I have certain products that I'm responsible for. I do demonstrations of that software, try to really show how our software might be able to solve problems that specific mine sites are having.
How do you sort of have that communication with customers and potential customers to even keeping yourself? Is it sort of an ongoing training process? Because I'm sure, like every company now, RPM is always developing and refining the process. So is it as much? Is it split? Is your time split between educating the customers and then getting educated yourself?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, we've got a number of pieces of software, and that product scope is expanding all the time. So keeping on top of the new software that we're developing, that we're acquiring, new releases and functionality that's coming out. So making sure that we're always on top of exactly what the company's doing, what our software is doing, how it's growing and expanding, and being able to make sure that we can connect that with what our customers' needs are or potential customers' needs.
Andrew, I want to jump it back over to you here because I want to, as with before we get too deep into the episode, I want to highlight a very specific part that I think is a fairly important part of RPM Global and obviously as a solution for the mining industry, and that's the AMT. So can we kick off with your sort of your role and responsibility, and then pivot into that software system, that management
Yeah,
system?
sure. Yeah. No. Look. So my background is I've spent 15 years in the asset management and maintenance world. Went to school to become a mechanical engineer, and then I spent my entire career in the mining industry. And then I joined RPM a few years ago, sort of to help other clients based off of some of my experience and understanding of what's out there, to help them understand how can they solve their challenges, and how specifically AMT can do so. So when you look at mining operations, it's very typical for the maintenance costs of an operation to be anywhere from 30 to 50% of total operating costs. So that's a huge amount of money that's going out every year, year over year. And that money, that budget, it's not a nice linear trend as you'd want it to be. It varies quite significantly year over year, just depending on where different machines are at within their life cycle. So AMT is an acronym that actually stands for Asset Management Tool, and it's based off of what we've got is proprietary, and what the brains and smarts, what makes AMT amazing is dynamic life cycle costing. So what that does is we're able to take a look at a machine, an asset, whether it be a fixed plant, maybe it's a sag mill or a cyclone feed pump or something, or a mobile side of things. We're looking at haul trucks, shovels, what have you, and take a look at, well, okay, I know how much it's going to cost up front to buy it, but then how much is it going to cost me over the life of that machine to actually run it? Because it's not unheard of for the sustained operating maintenance cost for the machine to cost anywhere from 3 to 10 times as much as the upfront capital cost. So we're talking large dollars real fast over the life of this machine. So the dynamic life cycle costing helps us to be able to project forward all the future spend that we're going to have for each asset for this entire life cycle. So from the time we purchase it, operate it, to the time we decide to dispose of it and end the life of that asset, we want to know what that cost is. Lots of people can be able to develop these life cycle models and do so. But what makes AMT unique is its ability to be dynamic. And the way it does that is because each day on every mine site across the globe, we're generating dozens, if not hundreds, of work orders on each one of these machines to do different jobs, repair different aspects, to do PM services, what have you. What AMT does is able to understand when that job was last performed and update its life cycle to project that forward. So I may start by buying this machine and say, okay, yeah, this is what my life cycle is going to look like. But then once reality comes and I start having breakdowns in the field, or I want to try to get better and change how I'm doing things by switching out my PM services or what have you, I want to be able to update that life cycle model. Or I want to be able to take a copy of it and play around with different scenarios to understand, how do I get back on track? How do I make sure I'm doing the best thing for this asset? And that's where, with AMT, we look at things on a holistic approach. We want to make sure that you're delivering asset performance to meet the corporate objectives. And we do so to look at the cost, certainly. That's an important one. We want to be sustainable over that cost. But we also need to understand the risks. Oftentimes, the risks associated with decisions we're making sort of live below the surface, and AMT helps sort of pull back that veil to make that visible to everyone. We want to make sure we're doing it to a sustained standard. So I'm able to compare my assets, one against another and one site against another site, to make sure, are we doing things the way we say we want to do from a corporate asset management perspective, and doing so over the life of the asset. And that's really the big key thing, is actually making sure that we're taking a step back, looking at the overarching life of that asset. And when you start to do that, your viewpoint for how you make those decisions changes quite a bit. And there's quite a significant amount of savings and benefit that comes from having that ability.
Well, I know now I can't remember the name of that. So do you have, correct me if I'm wrong, you have mapping software and like I saw these open pit schematics, and so when you're doing asset management, are you taking into account stuff like we've done entire episodes about things like terrain and that sort of stuff? Are you taking all of that, or is it like an average based on just this equipment's use, or are you taking into account the environment that the product itself is in?
Look, the environment is very important. The operating context for any asset has to be fully understood, because you and I may operate the same machine, But if you're operating it up in the Canadian Arctic somewhere north, and I'm in the desert in Central America, those are going to be two different operating contexts. So high altitude versus sea level, right? So those go in, and those will factor these strategies, underlying strategies that we have to build up what it's going to take to efficiently and effectively run this machine for its life. So that definitely comes into play. So our software in the past, like I said, we cover the whole gamut from the software. So a lot of it does some of that simulation, some of the mine planning up front. But then in order for those plans to be executed, they all rely on these assets to go get them done, right? So there's always this symbiotic relationship between the operations folks who need to operate these machines to get the production to meet the targets, and the maintenance folks who have to deliver those machines at an acceptable cost and acceptable performance level, so they have that ability to produce that and be efficient. So we have to work together to truly understand that at the end of the day to meet those targets.
Derek, I wanted to ask you a question about just
Sure.
communicating what Andrew is talking about, because do the people, when you initiate conversations, we've got CIM coming up, and you're on the floor, someone comes in,
Yep.
it's a new, you exchange cards and do the whole thing. Is the concept clear of what an RPM Global can do? Is there an understanding, or like how much off that, you've got a site manager
Mhm.
that you start talking to? How much education is actually required just to get the ball rolling, so that you get someone like Andrew in to dig into the nuts and bolts and all that sort of thing? I'm curious about that initial process that you have to undergo.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think it really starts with, who are we talking to, right? So a general manager will have certain things that he's looking at. A maintenance manager will have certain things that they're responsible for. So depending on the individual and what their role is, we can start sort of gearing in on what conversation might make the most sense for that person. But we ask a lot of questions, and that's really the starting point of every conversation that we have. Is we ask a lot of questions. We really try to understand what's going on in their operations currently, what their priorities are, for the next year, next couple of years. Really sort of try to, at the same time that we're kind of saying we cover these broad areas. We have a number of pieces of software in that take care of a number of different aspects of mining. We're always asking questions to really understand, what are their specific challenges, what are the things that are priorities for them, and then we can start honing in on, it's an Andrew AMT conversation, or it's myself with IMAFS, which I think we'll talk about a little later. If their struggles are in mine planning, we have a number of pieces of software that can help in that area. A lot of places now have covered off most of that piece, but really struggling to execute the plan and meet their targets and things like that. So, depending on the areas that they're having challenges in, we can sort of hone in on what software packages that we have that might help to address that. So really, by having open-ended conversations, asking a lot of questions, we really start to understand what the best fit is and who the best person on our end is to start having further discussions and deeper dives into some of those areas.
And I think that's important too, because what Derek's mentioning is each person we're going to talk to that's going to come across that floor, they're going to have a different set of challenges and things that they're going to be trying to get help with to solve, right? But when we break those down, they're all kind of fundamentally grouped in sort of the same type of buckets, right? And because as a global company, and we've spent the last 50 years developing a lot of solutions across a broad range of the entire mining life cycle, our biggest challenge is just to get them to tell us what that is, right? Because as soon as we sort of understand, what they're focused on today, because they're going to have a long-term plan for where they want to see themselves and where they want to be in the next 5 years. So we need to figure out what that short-term to mid-term challenge and problem is. And odds are we probably got someone somewhere in the business, either on the software side or potentially on the advisory side, that can fill that need.
Yeah. And I guess in these situations you're having this conversation, it's not like they're expecting you to have this answer right now. It's probably much more important to them to know that you understand what their issue is. I mean, I'm putting it very simply, but that I guess that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and the fact that we've got the people within the business that have faced those challenges in the past, and so you're not trying to explain something to someone who hasn't seen it or been in a similar solution before.
Right. I kind of wanted to actually with asset management, when I initially was talking to RPM, I was actually thinking of it very much from a mine operator's standpoint. But through our discussion, I realized, oh no, it's contractors and OEMs and that. So Andrew, could you I want to get into IMAFS here in a bit too, but before we do that, I wanted to sort of stick with the topic right now with AMT.
Sure.
And sort of just divide out those three examples and how they'd be utilized.
Yeah, like you mentioned at the top of the show, we estimate that over 50% of the large mobile assets are tracked using AMT,
which is crazy, by the way.
Yeah, and there's a lot of machines running around on the planet for sure. And the way we were able to do that is because if you look at the major manufacturers, right, the Caterpillar, Komatsu, and Hitachi, they're all using AMT in some shape or form. And the reason that those manufacturers, those OEMs, want to have AMT, and in fact, the original reason why AMT was developed was to help support one of the OEMs, actually a Caterpillar dealer in Indonesia, that they had a need, right? Like all OEMs do, is they need to understand what is it going to take. The specific need that they had was, I want to, as an OEM, be able to, dealer for this instance, I want to be able to help customer X, and I want to take over their maintenance and repair of their large mobile assets. So I want to take over that job. I want to go win that business. So to do so, I have to put forward a proposal that's going to be appealing to the client, so they say, yep, no, that makes sense for us as a business, but also from my perspective as that OEM dealer to say, well, I need to make sure I'm profitable. So to do so is very difficult back before AMT was developed. So AMT was specifically designed so that you can project out those costs.
When was it designed? Sorry, I just curious. When?
I think it's been about, it would have been about over 25 years now that AMT's been around. So it's, like I said, it was originally developed for maintenance and asset management folks, and it's been grown specifically designed for those maintenance and asset management folks. So it's not like, in my career, like the only tool really given to the maintenance folks as handed down by the CFOs is, here's the ERP that allows you to do some work orders. Go do your thing with it. And from a maintenance asset management perspective, there's a lot of gaps left by ERPs. The ERPs are great because you need to have that work management system to identify, track your work orders, build up your bill of materials that develops all the costs. And be able to execute and sort of track what's been done. That's all solid stuff. But the problem is that information just lives in that ERP, and it kind of just gets lost, and you use it as a financial reporting system. The great thing about AMT is it unlocks that. So I can take that information that all these OEMs have, right? They've got this information, and all of our clients have that type of information to some level of accuracy. We unlock that information, we put it together in a projection, and now we can forecast it out. An ERP will just show you the next due. So if I've got a PM coming up that's supposed to happen every 500 hours, it'll show me when the next one's coming due. AMT is going to show you, yeah, the next one's coming due, but all the future ones until the machine's shut down. So if that machine's going to run for the next 15 years, it's projecting 15 years out in the future. And each time that job is done, I should know, how much it's going to cost me. I've got some sort of buildup of what the bills of materials are, the parts, the lubes, what have you, the tooling. I should understand what the labor is going to be and how much downtime is associated with it. So by doing that, a dealer is now able to project that out there and say, well, here's how much I'm going to spend or should be spent to maintain that machine. Understand what my profit margin should be, so I can build that in there. So I can now go and produce a quote that says, okay, client X, I think I can do this job for you for whatever the amount is. But I know that when I'm actually doing this job in reality, I'm still going to be profitable, and I can report out against that in real time. As well as the other thing the OEMs are going to love about AMT and why they utilize it is, for a lot of the miners, and each time they sell a machine, they've sold fleets of hundreds and hundreds all over across the globe, right? They may not know where that machine is or what's happening with it, but they know, just like we know, that the capital cost up front is the small amount. The big amount is the maintenance that it's going to take to repair that, and they want to get that business. So they're going to use, and they're going to put that machine that they sold to you, customer X, into their AMT system, so they can identify, well, when should an engine be replaced on that machine?
Right.
When are they going to need the transmission? So that way I can make sure that I'm in front of that customer and say, hey, you're coming due for these big components. Do you need us to procure those for you so we can sell those additional parts to you? So that's the way the OEMs are really utilizing AMT to, like I said, both produce contracts to make sure they're competitive and profitable, as well as track their customers' assets to understand, like, when they're going to require certain additional services and components to be able to meet their needs, and help them plan that demand in the factories to make sure that they're able to, say, hey, here's what demand is going to be over the next few years. Make sure that we're able to meet that demand and keep our customers happy and productive.
So if you've got AMT as on like the dealer level at the OEM level, now you've got a contractor that comes on, and maybe you could outline an example that a contractor comes on. Does that transfer over to them? Do they need to now then adopt a new version of AMT? And does it sync up? Like, how does that sort of work as the asset goes from basically changes hands in a contractor, from a contractor standpoint?
Yeah. So typically the contractors, they'll either be one of two ways. Either the contractors will come in and they'll be maintaining someone else's assets. So it'll be the miner themselves has their assets, and we say, listen, contractor ABC, we want you to come in because we don't want to hire up to have a maintenance department. You're experts in this field. Come in here and you maintain this equipment for us, or you take care of it. We just want to write you a check and be able to produce over here. So that's the one side of it. The other side of it would be actually the contractors themselves are some of the biggest customers for the dealers and the OEM. So they're actually buying machines themselves and then going to the actual mining companies, like, listen, we've already got our assets. You don't have to buy the capital. You don't have to put in the infrastructure. You don't have to try to manage the inventory. We'll do it over here. You just write us the check and we'll just come in as a service and we'll contract and do that contract mining for you. And they're able to do that, and they'll be able to act very agile and quick and adjust much faster and easier than some of these larger multinational companies are able to do. So contractors fill a very important gap in that solution. So when they're doing that, they want a lot of similar things that an OEM would want, or a dealer in that situation. So they want to be able to know, okay, how do I go to tender and win this contract, because there's multiple contractors out there that are going to potentially bid on this work that I want to do. So how do I do that and make sure I'm going to win the job, but still be profitable? And in order to do that, again, with maintenance being one of the biggest costs that they're going to see, is they need to be able to accurately forecast what that's going to cost. So it's very easy to do a contract for, if I just buy a fleet of 50 brand new machines today and say, okay, I'm going to go operate for the next 5 years. That's easy. Everybody kind of understands what that is. The difficulty comes when I've got a handful of machines that are now 2 years old. I've got a handful of machines that are 10 years old, and some that are 15 years old. They're in completely different spots on their life cycle cost curve, right? So some are going to be needing some major components coming due. Some aren't. Some are going to be close to needing to be replaced within the contract. So AMT allows you to see what all that variable cost is going to be, so you're not left whole in the bag and you lose money on the job, but yet you're able to produce a quote that's not so high that you risk losing the job. And then you're able to track it throughout that period and actually develop invoices and send out invoices that track based off of your actual cost, your individual margin levels, and the different cost of codes that you want to have that match your business, to help you just be more efficient and really understand what's happening within that business, so that, again, you can maintain that agility and flexibility and provide that service that so many mining clients need.
I guess on the contractor side too, is also things like acquisitions. When you're expanding your fleet through an acquisition, and now you're taking over another, I don't know, 50 assets, and they're spread out all over multiple mine sites and all that sort of stuff. Then you have to actually adopt you actually have to integrate their
Yeah.
their fleet into your system as well. I guess that's sort of a key component as well.
Yeah, that's a big one. And the other thing too is a lot of contractors, they've sort of identified, well, I don't really want to be a long-term operator of an asset. For us, for our company, we want to buy a machine, we're going to run it for maybe 3 or 4 years, and then we want to sell it while the value is still
Right.
relatively high on the used market, and I'm going to get a new one. So that way I'm not really sinking a whole lot of money and effort into this whole life. So for them, modeling a life cycle for an asset is different because their life cycle is much shorter. So now they really need to be smart and understand exactly where those machines are at, so they can avoid some of those big failures coming, because they don't want to put too much money into an asset, right, and then sell it and go, well, hang on, we just let a couple $100,000 walk out the door because we didn't actually follow the standard we wanted to. So and at the same time is they don't want to try to like run the machine all the way down so that there's no hours left on the components, and then try to sell that because the book value is going to be quite low, right? So they have to find that sweet spot that makes it valuable for them as a company, as well as that resale market, and be able to keep their machines at that high availability level to meet the needs that are required by the mining customers, and say, yep, we'll give you a 92, 93% availability guarantee, and we're going to come in, we're going to do that contract mining for you.
I mean, it, you know, we do these shows, and I always kind of chuckle when people think our shows are too long, and then we start talking, and it's like the questions could just keep coming. We could probably bring up charts. There's probably 100 different examples that we could use.
You got to start pulling on this string and never ends. Really.
Yeah, exactly. But for the sake of covering a few more things, Derek, can we talk a little bit about IMAFS? What it is? I know it's got an AI component. Can you just sort of walk us through what it is and how it applies to the customers?
Absolutely. So IMAFS, another acronym, stands for Inventory Management and Forecasting Solution. And really what it does, so I've got a background about 15 years in supply chain management, mostly in the mining industry. And one of the things that supply chain managers, warehouse people, inventory analysts, we're always struggling with is we're trying to support the operations, like maintenance departments, make sure that we have the spare parts that they need to keep that equipment running, and make sure the availability of those parts is very high. But also at the same time, we often report into a finance department that wants to keep our inventory as low as possible because there's a lot of money tied up in that inventory. So supply chain people are constantly sort of trying to juggle two different things at the same time. Let's make sure we have all the parts, and then at the same time, let's make sure we don't have too much money tied up in parts. And it's a really difficult thing to manage.
It's a balancing act, right? Because if you ask the maintenance asset management folks and what parts they should have, all of them. I want them, all of them here, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that's incredibly costly. I mean, Andrew mentioned, some of the costs of some of these larger components, and, to have a spare engine on site just in case,
Yeah.
for a large truck is kind of ridiculous. But, sometimes you need to do that. So really the thing is, with traditional inventory management systems and ERP systems, they're really good at telling you what you've used, how often you've used it, things like that. But what they don't do is they don't tell you, what do we think is going to happen? What do we think that usage is going to look like going forward? And therefore, what should we set our mins and maxes, our minimum quantity on hand, our maximum quantity on hand for every part? What do we need to set those at to optimize both that availability while minimizing the cost, the capital cost or operating capital tied up in inventory. And what IMAFS does is it's really a forecasting solution. It optimizes your inventory on both of those fronts. So maximizing the availability of parts while minimizing the cost of the inventory you're carrying. by using things like you mentioned, AI, artificial intelligence, different types of forecasting methods, and algorithms, and it looks at every part in your inventory and decides, the system itself, looking at the history and how items have been used, what that usage pattern has looked like, and determines the appropriate forecasting method to use going forward, to tell you that we think you're going to use 3 of these in the next year, at these different points in time, roughly. Therefore, based on how long it takes you to what the lead time is on purchasing those parts and replacing that inventory and the usage patterns, here's what we think your appropriate level of inventory should be. This is when you should buy it. This is what you should max up to. And it does that for every part, essentially on a monthly basis, and is constantly recalculating this. So you can always ensure that we have the parts that we need, but we're not carrying so much inventory that it's going to be detrimental to the overall financial position of the business.
How important has that tool become in the last couple of years, and as supply chain issues kind of are arising and everybody's trying to figure that out? How many people have added this, if they didn't already have it, added it into their systems?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that it's always been important, but now with the supply chain issues globally, the importance of really knowing what you need, understanding what those lead times are, how they're changing. We've had a lot of people that are customers of ours, have had to go in and manually adjust those lead times, saying, it's historically it's been, 2 weeks to get this in, but now it's going to be 2 months or 3 months or 6 months.
Yeah.
So the system can now account for that and adjust those inventory levels based on all that information that you have and that you provide it. And so it's just becoming more and more valuable in times of fluctuation like we're in right now.
And the other thing too is when we look at who those clients are, mining customers are usually in remote locations too, right?
Absolutely.
So you got people in the Arctic Circle or in remote parts of the Andes or the Central African jungles. Like making sure you have the right things there is not a small task. So often they have more parts than they necessarily really need. So they've got this extra spend that's sitting there, just in case, because they know it's difficult to get theirs. But as Derek mentioned with IMAFS, it's able to actually say, well, hang on a minute, you don't need some of this stuff, but actually you're missing a whole bunch of this stuff that you do need, which is affecting your maintenance folks, which
Isn't that
where I love it.
Yeah. I was curious, again, going back to sort of what we've seen in the last couple of years, and people needing to adopt new strategies, and fleet management becoming even more and more important. What does it take? Let's say a contractor has a couple hundred assets in their fleet, or it's a large operating mine in a remote area where they've got all from pump parts to tires to just all these sort of things that they've got, to actually adopt a system like IMAFS or ATM. What does that take? Like what kind of timeline are you actually looking at? ATM.
Andrew, you want to start with AMT, because they're both slightly different.
Yeah, I think from on the AMT side of things, the adoption, it really will vary depending on a number of things. The size of the fleet, for sure. The size of the user base that's going to be using it. It's going to depend on where each customer's at within their maintenance maturity journey, and what really they're focused at. So oftentimes, like, we can get parts of the business up to speed in 3 or 4 months to start looking at the haul fleet or something. But oftentimes they see an AMT deployment and adoption as more of a long-term two-year program, where we say we want to come in, we're going to put AMT, or we want to put in a big effort to start to optimize those strategies, because we know we got some development and cleanup of our master data that we want to do, and AMT can help us focus that time and effort. And so we want to get to where our cost coverage, so if we've got 100% of our maintenance spend right now is only covered by, say, 20% of true strategies that we have within our system, we want to take that from 20% to 40% over the next 2 to 3 years. And that's a huge effort to try to do that, because we're talking about hundreds of assets and dozens, if not hundreds, of strategies below there, building them up and building up with detail with parts, labor, miscellaneous costs, all the sort of information we need to have in there. And when you do that, by focusing on that effort to get there, you start to now increase your planned maintenance. You start to improve your equipment availability and reliability because you're now doing more jobs at a more standardized level. So you're getting better results. The machines are running better. You have less breakdowns, and the cost with that can be huge. We're talking anywhere from 1.5% to 3% reduction in your overall maintenance spend. We're talking about depending on the sites and the fleets, a couple percentage improvement in their availability, and a lot of efficiency gains that can come with that as well. But when you start to really understand what it takes to maintain these machines and putting in place that plan to actually build up these strategies and get the most out of it.
And what about IMAFS?
Yeah, IMAFS is a little bit simpler solution. Essentially we come in, we take a data dump from your ERP system of all your parts, your inventory items, your usage history and things like that. We integrate with the ERP to be able to pick up that information on a regular basis. That work, we've done that with a number of different ERP systems. So that effort is, usually within a couple of months, we can have IMAFS up and running, very easy to install. The system is incredibly intuitive and user friendly. So as far as training goes, we can train up an entire inventory management staff in, a few days to a week, have them up and running, being able to use this. When we talk about adoption, though, kind of taking it to the next step, it's one thing to be able to use it. It's one thing to understand how it works. It's another thing to really trust it and trust the information that the system is providing you. So what happens in a lot of cases is, the system will say, well, you need a minimum inventory of 3 and a maximum of 6. And somebody will go, well, I know that we need, a minimum of 9 and a maximum of 18. So, trusting the information that the system is giving you takes a little bit more time. And so what we find is, we do quarterly business reviews with our customers, and what we'll provide is, you can use the system 100%, trust everything it gives you, or you can kind of manually override some of those mins and maxes because I just know that this is not quite right. So what we do in these quarterly business reviews is we can actually show them, what the performance of inventory has been on the manually managed items versus the items that IMAFS has recommended the mins and maxes for, and almost 100% of the time, the IMAFS predictors and forecasts are much better than what the manually adjusted items are performing at. So that starts to build that trust in all the users that, hey, you know what, this system actually knows what it's doing, and we can start relying on this information and really truly optimize our inventory. So that takes a little bit longer to really get that trust, but really getting it up and running with IMAFS is a fairly simple process, very easy to train people up. One of the things that I love about it, and Andrew often tells me, IMAFS is a great product to demonstrate, to demo for somebody, because as soon as you pull it up, you just start walking through it. People that understand supply chain management and inventory control, they just look at it and go, oh yeah, this just makes sense.
Right. And then of course that expedites the adoption, of course.
Absolutely.
I was just curious too, because we do so many of these interviews, we have, things like tire management systems coming on, oil changes and all these types of things. So when you're RPM, is it integrated into the tire management system, or are you actually supplying that tire management system that we're actually talking about, or but it's branded as there? Sort of, how does that all integrate together in all these management systems that are sort of focused in on the same unit, but for different purposes? I don't know if that question makes sense, but it's just something I'm curious about.
Yeah, so look, the trend right now for asset management, well, I shouldn't say trend. The best practice has always been, the more you can understand what's happening to the machine, the more information you can gather on those conditions and condition monitoring to understand what that is, see those trends. The more effective and the smarter your decision making can be. So that comes into account in a lot of different ways. So like for an AMT, I want to be able to understand, like, when should I be changing engines? A simple example. I need to take into account, like, what's the condition of the oil? What is the condition of some of the sensors? Like, are my air filters going into bypass mode? Are my injectors starting to get out of whack? Like what's the condition of my turbos, right? So I need to understand where those are, so I can truly say, like, well, I should change the engine now or next month or what have you, right? So similar, like you mentioned, like some of these oil and tire monitoring systems, we can take that as an input feed, actually, and show that within AMT, so you can actually see, well, hang on, here's my last 6 readings and where they're at. So yeah, my strategy says I should do this in November, right? But based off of my oil conditions or these other conditions that are coming in here, actually I'm going to schedule next month, because I don't want to risk the fact that this may fail on me. And it's not going to, and then when it fails out in the field, now I've got a massive increase in cost, because now my component costs more. I've got production interruptions. I've got to wait on parts. I've got to wait on labor. I've got to wait on materials. So being able to take that information to bring it into for my long-term planning and my scheduling, it sort of brings it all together. And then on the flip side of things, for the IMAFS side of stuff, our strategies and the development of those can feed into IMAFS to help them know when they should have those right parts, right? So it's an input feed. AMT can feed into IMAFS as another one of those streams, so that smart computer analysis engine says, what am I going to need for the next 5 months, 6 months, what out there. It's taking into that account the fact that we're adjusting that, feeding it over to them. Plus, it's looking at the history and finding those trends, saying, yep, here's what I need to order to basically meet those needs.
I'm just going to ask a question, just as we wrap up here, because you've both been in the industry long enough. I think you'll both have a perspective on it. Do you think, I've noticed from doing our show, when we started, we were a small show. A lot of people didn't know about us, so that was fair. A lot of people were hesitant to come on, especially and do, we're going to talk for an hour. That's a lot of information you're sharing. But there's definitely a hunger now, not just on our platform, but I see a lot of more information getting out there. Do you think most people even begin to have a concept of how advanced mining has become? Or do you think it's still sort of what people picture and what it actually is are two different things? And I'll just let either one of you who want to take it first. What are your thoughts on it?
I definitely say most people have no idea. And it's still sort of the same pick an axe down in the hole, right? I've got, I know certainly, like, I grew up from Montana. When I went to university as a mechanical engineer, I wasn't planning on going to the mining industry. And so when I arrived in the mining industry, my eyes were certainly opened up to it. But people within the mining industry, we would know how advanced things are getting. It's an information age at the end of the day. So the desire to understand and improve and find better ways to solve a problem is just growing day over day, which is why shows such as yourselves are helping spread that message out there to feed that thirsty audience. And while people are finding these solutions and finding more innovative ways to solve the solution that wasn't quite either understood fully or able to be attacked before, and it's just driving the whole industry forward. As we believe to advance that industry to be more sustainable and efficient and safer, so that we can have, a big part of mining is that social outlook as well. So while the outside look of mining still, I think, is a bit back in the old vision of what it can be, we want to help bring that bring that awareness up and make sure that everyone understands, we're not just, spraying the face with water and just collecting all the stuff and doing it. Like we have advanced techniques now. We have advanced software. We have really smart people doing a lot of incredible things that are pushing the forefront in a lot of areas to help make sure that we're doing the right thing and we're able to do so effective, efficient, and safely.
How about you?
Yeah.
What do you sort of see from both from the outside perspective and from internally inside the industry?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I talk to different people who, most of my friends and family don't work in the mining industry. And whenever I tell them some of the things that are going on in mining, they're just completely blown away. We talk about things like autonomous cars, and everybody thinks that's such a futuristic concept. And I
I know.
had to explain to somebody, one of my customers has been using autonomous trucks underground for 12 years.
Yeah.
This technology's been used in mining for a long time, and people are just blown away by that. People, I've got some friends now that are talking about things like the metaverse and digital twins of different things. And I say, we have software that provides a digital twin of your mind, and
I was
they're
thinking
just
that
like,
last night.
they're
Yeah.
just like, really? They're just completely dumbfounded. And I think the other thing too is, I think a lot about the younger kids coming up and going into school and trying to decide what kind of job they're going to take on, and especially kids that are really into technology and things like that. They don't even think of mining as an option. And I think that needs to change. And I think people need to understand that mining is a very, very heavily technology driven industry, and we need those brightest brains coming out of schools coming into the mining industry to keep pushing that. I think there's a bit of a lag now. I've got a colleague of mine whose son just came out of a mining engineering program and had no idea that some of the things that we do as RPM or that are going on in mining even existed, because even the schools and the professors aren't teaching any of this. So it's I think there's a bit of a disconnect even within the industry in terms of everybody understanding how technology is impacting mining, the amount of technology we're using, and just the sophistication of the industry.
Yeah, I will say, even for me, I had a conversation yesterday with a manufacturer that's going to be coming on the show here in the next couple months, and he's saying that there's about one person for every 3 jobs that gets posted right now, and then we need to increase the demand. And I've sort of been thinking lately of what's Crownsman's responsibility on that, and because I do think it's such an amazing thing. Mining is such an amazing industry, just by the sheer volume and the technology and just the concepts that people are coming up with and processing. It just goes on and on. And it is something that people will be interested in, but you almost, it's even for us. I remember I was in the used equipment industry, but it took me a few years just to sort of even get to know people and get to have any concept of what was going on. And I think there maybe is another level that mining can get to sort of bring, I think, at least another generation of people that aren't, not their father was in mining, but like a new generation and a whole new scope of people in.
Yeah, and it's difficult too, because the main source where a lot of people are made aware is by the general news. And as with all things in the news, they focus on the bad things that happen or the tragedies that happen here or there, like an airplane crash somewhere, right? But how many amazing airplanes took off and landed with this amazing technology every single day that never gets talked about? Similar thing happens in the mining industry. They always sort of find the little small things that go wrong, but don't get to see the broader picture of how amazing it truly has become.
Yeah. I think it's a discussion, and it's funny that we're talking about it now, because yesterday, the reason I asked about it is because I was having this conversation in private yesterday, and I thought, okay, maybe we have a responsibility. I mean, we've got a platform, so we might have a responsibility to try to do something. So I might be picking your brains off air at some point to decide
Absolutely.
maybe how we can sort of draw some people in from sort of that outside that maybe just aren't
Mhm.
seeing it.
Sure.
Anytime. Yeah.
Gentlemen, RPM, I know I've met people from your team over the years. I've wanted to have RPM on for a long time. I genuinely hope you come back on the show because we didn't even scrape the surface. We really didn't. But it's an
No
amazing
doubt.
company and an amazing industry. So I really do appreciate your time on the show today.
Yeah, anytime. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody, thank you for watching. We will have plenty of links, even ways you can directly connect with our guests here on the show. Please keep watching. Please keep suggesting guests. It's been absolutely amazing the amount of the quality of guests we've had on lately, just because of people like you watching and connecting us. It's absolutely amazing. So thank you. Please keep subscribing and sharing. We will see you on the next episode of Mining Now.